For years, historians have studied ancient Rome, a civilization whose impact is still being felt in our time through the ruins of some of its most amazing physical structures that can still be visited today, such as the Colosseum, Pantheon, and Baths of Caracalla. Interesting, right? If given a time machine, you might just want to hop into it and take a quick trip back to relive the lives lived by people from that era and visit these places in their full glory. However, would a person from this era easily fit into the ancient Roman lifestyle, or would they rather find it an impossible thing to do? In this video, I will shed light on the challenging conditions that would have made survival a daunting task in ancient Rome. Our journey begins with disease and sanitation, a crucial aspect often overlooked. Picture a city where illness lurks around every corner, threatening your life with each passing day. While the ancient Romans might have been oblivious to all this, a 21st century individual would be shocked by how much of a death trap living in that era could be. Today, we have access to clean water in our homes, which ancient Rome could not boast of. They heavily relied on aqueducts to transport water from far-off sources. This method made clean water very limited, leading many Romans to turn to tainted water from contaminated wells and rivers. Waterborne illnesses, including dysentery, cholera, and typhoid fever, spread quickly as a result of this contamination. The problems with cleanliness in Rome were made worse by the inadequate sewage systems. The main method of removing waste was the use of cesspits, or open channels that conveyed garbage through the streets, including human excrement. In addition to being unpleasant, the filthy smells and unhealthy surroundings served as a haven for rodents and insects that spread disease. It should therefore come as no surprise that the Romans lived in fear of epidemics and plagues. The Antonine Plague, which struck in the 2nd century while Emperor Marcus Aurelius was in power, is one prominent example. This epidemic, which was thought to have been brought in by either smallpox or measles, spread quickly throughout the empire into every nook and cranny. The sickness is also said to have claimed the lives of thousands of individuals, including soldiers, commoners, and even aristocrats in ancient Rome. According to some accounts, the fatality rate in some of the afflicted districts was as high as 25%. This high mortality rate had a very significant influence on Roman civilization, disrupting daily activities like trade and agriculture. It is also assumed that the rest of the population developed immunity to the ailment, as there were no reports of any cure being created to curb its spread. Now, let's turn our focus to the limited medical advancements of ancient Rome. Antibiotics, vaccines, and other common medical procedures weren't available in that era. If you were to live in that time period, the only medical treatments available to you in the event of an illness would be based on natural cures and herbs. These herbal remedies included basic balms and ointments, as well as elaborate concoctions that were used physically or consumed orally. While some were highly effective, many cures relied more on myth and legend and did not offer any healing for the afflicted. And if you got bitten by a venomous animal, it was not uncommon to cut into the wound with a hot blade to remove the poison. This painful act, which involved incision and sucking, was intended to prevent the spread of venom within the body. However, without modern knowledge of antivenoms and proper wound care, such practices often led to amputation. Amputation today is performed seamlessly, using anesthesia and other nerve-numbing procedures that ensure the person is unconscious through the entire process. Back then, the Romans performed it crudely, often involving the use of heated instruments, such as cauterizing irons to sever limbs. Fire was used to sterilize the wound, which was excruciatingly painful. People who couldn't bear it sometimes died during the process or were traumatized for life. All this means that a simple infection or injury could spell your doom, and any need for amputation would come with immense pain. What would have been easily treated with modern medicine often escalates into a life-threatening condition. Additionally, those with mental health conditions and immunodeficiencies were not adequately taken care of and were often left to the mercy of fate. Another reason you wouldn't survive in ancient Rome is the strict social hierarchy on which the era was built. Society was divided into different classes, namely the patricians, plebeians, equestrians, freedmen, and slaves. The patricians, plebeians, and equestrians belonged to the rich and powerful, which are more commonly known today as the upper class and middle class. They had all the advantages, such as great education, political connections, and access to resources that helped them maintain their status and enjoy life to the fullest. As for the freedmen and slaves, now known as the lower class, life was really tough, and it was almost impossible to climb up the ladder. Being born into the freedman category means your day-to-day life would often involve doing manual labor, working in fields, or any menial jobs to make ends meet. Still, these strenuous jobs were not often guaranteed, and you would most likely live life with the uncertainty of not knowing if you could make enough money to survive. Slaves had it even worse than the freedmen. They were treated as property, with no personal freedom or rights or claims to anything. They were forced to work for their owners, doing difficult, exhausting, and often life-threatening tasks, while given very little or no food. Meanwhile, female slaves bore the brunt of being sexually harassed or seen as mere playthings whose nudity should be shown to all, and when their owners were tired of them, they were disposed of like they weren't humans. Today, anyone can become anything they want to be if they put in the work and have a bit of luck. Perhaps the most important of all the reasons why you wouldn't survive in ancient Rome is the absence of modern amenities that we enjoy today. At the time, the bitter cold of winter was often warded off by sitting around fires or wearing thick clothes, while scorching summers were made more manageable through the use of handheld fans and taking multiple baths during the day and even at night. Compared to the comforts of heaters and air conditioning that we have now grown accustomed to, living in ancient Rome wouldn't be pleasurable. In more extreme weather conditions, the methods put in place by the Romans to cope often proved useless, making survival even more challenging. What's more, they faced challenges with regards to food shortages. Preservation methods were not as advanced as they are today. This meant that food transported could spoil during long journeys, leading to shortages and the risk of consuming contaminated or rotten food. In times of war, even the available food became smaller. Imagine the struggle of finding sustenance in a city teeming with people, where contaminated or spoiled food could claim your life. It was a constant battle against hunger, malnutrition, and the risk of consuming deadly substances. Paved roads, reliable transportation systems, and functional public services were also absent. Travel was arduous, communication was limited, and accessing resources was a challenge. Now we ride cars, bikes, and travel via planes and rails. These modernities have made life far easier, and doing without them is sure to reduce anyone's life expectancy. As a final point of reference, you are most likely familiar with movies based on the Roman era. With your popcorn in your hands and a can of Coke by the side, you might have watched gladiator games in such movies. Heads and limbs were often slashed off by blades of fighting opponents, and in some cases, dangerous animals were let loose in the arena, and it was either the fighter killed them or be killed. Although these movies are made of CGI, all those things did happen for a fact in ancient Rome. Gladiator games were the epitome of brutality and a full outlet for pervasive violence. If you found yourself in the arena, your survival hung by a thread. Win, and you might be expected to keep fighting other opponents. Lose, and your fate rests on the whims of the crowd, who either votes thumbs up or thumbs down, to indicate whether you should be killed or spared. When we consider these facts, it is evident that ancient Rome was a dangerous city where one's chances of surviving were slim. Violence pervaded society. Disease lingered in the shadows, medical knowledge was limited, social standing determined your possibilities, and finding enough food was a continual struggle. It was a world far different from our own, and many people would struggle in it.